Are you ready to face your fears? Mr. Horror is back with 3 trucker horror stories that will make your skin crawl. Buckle up and get ready for a ride you'll never forget. It was a chilly October night, and the full moon cast eerie shadows across the desolate truck stop. Jim, a seasoned trucker, had been driving long hours across the country and was eager for a break. The truck stop was unusually quiet, with only a handful of trucks parked in the dimly lit area. Jim parked his rig and stepped out into the cold air, taking a deep breath. He felt a shiver run down his spine, and it wasn't just the biting wind. Something about this place felt off. He shook it off, attributing it to his exhaustion, and decided to grab a hot meal and some rest. As he approached the truck stop diner, he noticed that the few patrons inside seemed tense, whispering among themselves. They shot glances at him, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The atmosphere was thick with unease, but Jim couldn't quite pinpoint the cause. Jim took a seat at the counter, and a waitress with a forced smile handed him a menu. He ordered a cup of coffee and a burger, trying to make small talk. The waitress responded with short, nervous answers, her eyes darting around the room. Jim couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was on edge, and he wanted to know why. He leaned in closer to the waitress and whispered, "Is there something going on here? Why does everyone seem so scared?" The waitress hesitated, but eventually replied, "I'm not supposed to say anything, but there's been a string of incidents. Truckers disappearing without a trace, rigs left abandoned on the side of the road." Jim's blood ran cold, but his curiosity was piqued. How many have gone missing? The waitress hesitated again, then whispered, 5 in the last month alone." As she walked away to place his order, Jim noticed an old man in the corner, nursing a cup of coffee. The man locked eyes with Jim and gestured for him to come over. Reluctantly, Jim obliged. The old man introduced himself as Earl, a trucker who'd been on the road for nearly 40 years. He spoke in hushed tones, explaining that he'd seen a lot in his time, but nothing like the horrors that had recently plagued the truck stop. "People around here think it's some kind of curse. They say there's a dark force that's been stalking truckers, preying on their fears, making them vanish into thin air. Some say it's a vengeful spirit, others a deranged killer, but no one knows for sure." Jim felt a chill run through him, but his practical nature made it hard for him to believe in curses and dark forces. "Surely there's a logical explanation," he said skeptically. Earl looked at Jim gravely and said, "There might be, but whatever it is, it's still out there, and you do well to watch your back." As Jim finished his meal, he couldn't shake the old man's words from his mind. He decided to sleep in his rig that night, locking the doors and keeping a close eye on his surroundings. As he lay there, sleep evading him, he couldn't help but wonder what could be lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And as the wind howled outside, he couldn't shake the sinking feeling that he might be next. Jim woke up the next morning feeling groggy, his sleep haunted by nightmares of shadowy figures and ghostly whispers. He rubbed his eyes and stepped out of his rig, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Everything appeared normal, but the eerie atmosphere persisted. As he fueled up his truck, he noticed another trucker, a woman named Linda, who seemed just as on edge as he was. Deciding to share what he'd heard the night before, Jim approached her and recounted the stories of the missing truckers and the dark force that seemed to be stalking them. Linda's face paled as she listened, and she revealed that she too had experienced strange occurrences on the road. She described how, during one of her late-night hauls, she'd spotted a figure standing at the side of the road. The figure had been shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Linda had felt an inexplicable terror, and she'd sped up to escape the sinister presence. They both agreed that they needed to get to the bottom of the mystery. Jim and Linda decided to team up, hoping that together they could uncover the truth and put an end to the horror plaguing the truck stop. Their investigation led them to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. Locals had whispered about the place, saying that it was haunted and cursed, the source of the darkness that had settled over the area. The building had once been a roadside attraction, but had closed down years ago after a series of tragedies, and it had been left to decay ever since. As Jim and Linda approached the crumbling structure, they felt the air grow colder, the atmosphere thick with malevolence. They exchanged nervous glances before stepping inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The building was filled with remnants of its past, dusty mannequins, broken carnival games, and eerie paintings that seemed to watch their every move. They crept through the shadows, their senses heightened as they listened for any sign of danger. As they ventured deeper into the building, they stumbled upon a room that looked like it had once been an office. Amidst the decay, they discovered an old journal belonging to the previous owner. Flipping through the pages, they found entries detailing the owner's descent into madness as he became obsessed with an ancient artifact he'd discovered on one of his travels. The artifact was said to have the power to bring darkness and chaos, and the owner had believed that by harnessing its power, he could achieve immortality. But instead, the artifact had consumed him, twisting his mind and causing him to commit unspeakable acts before disappearing without a trace. Jim and Linda realized that this artifact could be the key to unlocking the mystery of the missing truckers, and they knew they had to find it before it claimed more victims. As they continued their search, the building seemed to come alive around them, shadows shifting and whispers echoing through the halls. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream from somewhere within the building. They exchanged terrified looks, knowing that they couldn't leave without figuring out the source of the scream. But as they hesitated, they couldn't help but wonder what horrors awaited them deeper within the darkness, and would they be able to face them? Jim and Linda steeled themselves, fear clawing at their insides as they followed the sound of the screams. The darkness seemed to press in on them, suffocating and alive with malevolent energy. The building's sinister aura grew stronger with each step they took. They found themselves in a hidden chamber deep within the structure. The room was lit by flickering candles, casting shadows that danced along the walls. In the center of the chamber, they saw the ancient artifact, a twisted, dark crystal pulsating with power. They could feel the malevolence radiating from it, and they knew this was the source of the darkness that had been terrorizing the truckers. Bound to the walls, they discovered the missing truckers, pale and gaunt, their eyes filled with terror. As Jim and Linda approached, they could see that each of them had been marked with strange symbols, the same symbols that adorned the artifact. Before they could react, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form twisted and grotesque. It was the previous owner, his body warped by the power of the artifact. His voice, a guttural rasp, echoed through the chamber as he spoke. "You have discovered my secret," he hissed. "I have harnessed the power of this artifact to feed on the fear of the truckers, using their terror to fuel my immortality. But you will not escape to tell the tale." With a wave of his hand, the truckers began to scream in unison, their pain and fear amplifying the power of the artifact. Jim and Linda could feel their own fear rising, threatening to consume them. They knew they had to act quickly, or they would be lost to the darkness forever. Summoning all their courage, they lunged at the twisted figure, fighting to wrest the artifact from his grasp. As they grappled with him, the chamber shook, the walls cracking and crumbling around them. The battle was fierce, but Jim and Linda refused to give in to their fear, determined to save themselves and the missing truckers. In a final, desperate attempt, they managed to pry the artifact from the figure's hands. Linda, her hands shaking, lifted the dark crystal and hurled it to the ground, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. A chamber filled with a blinding light, and the twisted figure let out a bone-chilling scream as he disintegrated into dust. The power of the artifact broken, the missing truckers were released from their bonds, their expressions filled with relief and gratitude. The building, now free from the dark force that had consumed it, began to collapse around them. Jim, Linda, and the rescued truckers raced to escape the crumbling structure, their hearts pounding as they emerged into the night. As they stood outside the destroyed building, they knew they had faced the darkness and conquered it together. Their fear had threatened to consume them, but their courage and determination had prevailed. They had saved the truckers and lifted the curse that had haunted the truck stop for years. Jim and Linda exchanged a knowing glance, aware that their lives had been forever changed by their harrowing experience. They returned to the truck stop, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they'd faced together. And as they shared their story with the other truckers, they knew they had not only survived the darkness, but had emerged stronger, their courage a beacon of hope and inspiration for all who would listen. On a stormy night in late March, the wind howled like a mournful beast as rain lashed against the windshield of Max's truck. Max, a seasoned trucker, was driving along an isolated stretch of highway, his destination still hours away. The relentless storm had swallowed the landscape, leaving Max feeling unnerved and alone in the dark. As he navigated the treacherous road, Max's thoughts drifted to the unsettling stories he'd heard from fellow truckers. They had shared tales of ghostly hitchhikers, bizarre sightings, and strange disappearances along this very highway. Max had always dismissed these stories as mere urban legends, but as the storm raged around him, he couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of unease. As Max rounded a sharp bend, he caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the side of the road. He squinted through the rain, trying to make out the details. The figure appeared to be a woman, drenched and shivering, her face obscured by a tangle of wet hair. Max hesitated for a moment, the trucker's tales echoing in his mind, before pulling over to offer her assistance. He rolled down his window and shouted over the howling wind, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a lift?" The woman, her face still hidden, nodded silently before climbing into the passenger seat. Max could sense her unease, but he couldn't shake his own feeling of dread. The truck's interior seemed colder, the shadows darker. As they continued down the highway, Max tried to make conversation, hoping to alleviate his growing fear. The woman remained silent, her gaze fixed on the windshield, as if entranced by the storm. Max's unease deepened, and he began to feel as if he had made a terrible mistake. Just as Max was about to ask the woman to leave his truck, she spoke, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "There's something wrong with this place," she whispered. "I tried to escape, but it keeps pulling me back. The darkness, it won't let me go." Max's heart raced, his palms sweaty on the steering wheel. He asked her what she meant, but she didn't respond. The storm intensified, the rain pelting the truck like a barrage of stones, and Max felt as if he was being consumed by the darkness. As the night wore on, Max began to experience strange phenomena. The radio would switch on by itself, broadcasting eerie, distorted music. He caught fleeting glimpses of phantom vehicles in his rearview mirror, only to find nothing when he looked back. And the woman in his passenger seat seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like a ghostly apparition. The oppressive atmosphere grew heavier, and Max's fear threatened to swallow him whole. He knew he had to find a way to escape the darkness that was closing in around him, but he didn't know how. And as the storm raged outside, Max wondered if he was doomed to become another lost soul on this haunted highway. Max's desperation grew with each passing mile, the storm showing no signs of abating. The woman in the passenger seat remained silent, her presence a chilling reminder of the darkness that enveloped them. Max felt as though he was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. As he drove on, he noticed a faint flickering light up ahead, barely visible through the torrential rain. As he approached, he realized it was a small roadside diner, its neon sign struggling to shine through the darkness. Max decided to pull over, hoping to find some answers and, perhaps, a way to break free from the nightmare. The diner was nearly empty, with only a few weary patrons huddled in booths, their faces etched with concern. Max took a seat at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee, his hands trembling as he clutched the warm mug. He couldn't help but notice the fearful glances exchanged between the patrons, their whispered conversations punctuated by nervous laughter. Max summoned the courage to speak to the elderly waitress who had brought him his coffee. "Is there something strange happening around here?" he asked hesitantly. The waitress hesitated before answering in a hushed tone. "This stretch of highway has been cursed for as long as anyone can remember. People who drive through here have seen things, terrible things. Some even say the darkness itself is alive, hungry for the souls of those who dare to enter its domain." Max's heart sank as he listened, the truth of her words resonating deep within him. He knew he had to find a way to escape the darkness and help the mysterious woman who seemed to be trapped in its clutches. The waitress, seeing the determination in Max's eyes, leaned in closer and whispered, "There's an old legend about a ritual that can break the curse, but no one has ever dared to try it. They say you have to face the darkness head-on and confront your deepest fears. Only then can you banish the evil that haunts this place." Max knew that he had no other choice but to attempt the ritual. He returned to his truck, the woman still waiting in the passenger seat, her eyes reflecting the storm raging outside. He told her about the ritual, and she nodded silently, as if she already knew what needed to be done. Max drove to the heart of the cursed highway, the storm growing even more violent as they approached. He parked the truck in the center of the road, facing the darkness head-on. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the harrowing task ahead. Max and the woman stepped out of the truck, the rain pouring down on them as they stood in the eye of the storm. They began to recite the ancient words of the ritual, their voices barely audible above the howling wind. As they spoke, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, pressing in on them from all sides. Max felt his fear surge, images of his worst nightmares flashing before his eyes. He knew he had to confront these fears, or he would be lost forever. And as he faced his own terror, he realized that the mysterious woman was doing the same, her face finally revealed as she looked back at him, her eyes filled with determination. As Max and the woman continued to recite the ritual, the darkness around them seemed to take on a physical form, writhing and twisting like a living entity. Max felt as if he was being swallowed by his own fear, his nightmares clawing at the edges of his mind. But Max refused to give in. He focused on the woman beside him, her presence giving him the strength to face his own terror. As they confronted their fears together, Max felt a flicker of hope pierce through the oppressive darkness. The storm began to subside, the wind dying down to a whisper and the rain slowing to a gentle drizzle. As the final words of the ritual echoed into the night, the darkness began to recede, its malevolent grip on the highway slowly dissipating. Max and the woman, soaked and exhausted, stood in the dim light of the truck's headlights. They could hardly believe what they had accomplished, their victory over the darkness hard-won and bittersweet. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the woman turned to Max, her face finally visible. She was beautiful, her eyes shining with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved me from the darkness that had trapped me here for so long. I can finally move on." Max, overwhelmed by emotion, could only nod. He watched as the woman began to fade, her form becoming translucent, the first rays of sunlight passing through her. As she disappeared, Max felt a profound sense of loss, but also a deep sense of peace. He climbed back into his truck, the sun now shining brightly in the sky. As he drove away from the cursed stretch of highway, he knew he had done something extraordinary, something that would change him forever. The truck stop was abuzz with whispers and rumors when Max returned. Fellow truckers gathered around him, eager to hear the tale of his harrowing experience on the haunted highway. Max told them everything, his voice filled with awe and gratitude for the woman who had helped him face the darkness and emerge victorious. A story of Max's encounter with the darkness spread far and wide, becoming a legend among truckers. The haunted stretch of highway was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to the power of courage, determination, and hope. Max continued to drive the open road, the memory of the mysterious woman and the darkness they had faced together never far from his mind. He knew he would never forget her, the woman who had shown him that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light. And as Max's truck disappeared down the highway, the sun shining brightly overhead, the darkness that had once plagued the cursed road was gone, banished by the bravery and perseverance of a trucker who dared to face his fears and the woman who had been trapped in the shadows for far too long. It was a typical summer night, and Sarah had just finished her shift at the diner. She climbed into her car and began the long drive home. As she drove down the dark and deserted highway, she noticed a large semi-truck following her closely. She tried to speed up, but the truck stayed right behind her. Feeling uneasy, Sarah pulled off the highway and onto a small dirt road. A truck followed her, its headlights blinding her in the darkness. She tried to turn around, but the road was too narrow. She was trapped. Suddenly, the truck's horn blared, and Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat, his face obscured by the darkness. She tried to call for help, but her phone had no service. The truck pulled up beside her car, and the man rolled down his window. His voice was rough and menacing as he spoke to her. "Looks like you're lost, little lady. Need some help?" Sarah shook her head, too frightened to speak. The man got out of the truck and approached her car. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and a leather jacket. He leaned into her window and smiled, revealing yellow teeth. Sarah could smell his breath, which reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. "You're a pretty thing," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Maybe you should come with me." Sarah's heart raced as the man reached for her door handle. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal and sped away, narrowly missing the truck as she fled down the road. As she drove, tears streaming down her face, Sarah knew she had just narrowly escaped something terrible. She knew she needed to be more careful on the roads from now on. But Sarah's nightmare was far from over. As she drove, she noticed the same semi-truck following her again, its headlights shining brightly in her rearview mirror. She tried to lose it by taking different turns and roads, but it always seemed to find her. As the night wore on, Sarah became more and more exhausted. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours and was starting to hallucinate. She saw the same truck everywhere she went, even when it wasn't there. Eventually, Sarah pulled into a rest stop to try and get some rest. She parked her car and locked the doors, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As she lay down in the back seat to try and sleep, Sarah heard a noise outside her car. She peeked through the window and saw the same truck parked next to her, the driver's door open. Sarah's heart raced as she heard footsteps approaching her car. She reached for her phone to call for help, but it was dead. She was trapped and alone. The man from the truck appeared at her window, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. He reached for the handle, and Sarah screamed. In that moment, Sarah knew she was going to die, but she refused to go down without a fight. She reached for anything she could find in her car, grabbing a tire iron from the trunk. As the man opened her door, Sarah swung the tire iron with all her might, hitting him in the head. The man fell to the ground, unconscious. Sarah quickly got out of her car and ran to the truck, hoping to find help or a phone. But what she found was even more horrifying. The back of the truck was filled with cages, each one containing a person. Sarah realized she had narrowly escaped becoming one of them. She frantically searched for a way to free them, but the truck's doors were locked. As Sarah sat in shock, the man from the truck began to stir. She knew she had to act fast. She grabbed the keys from his pocket and unlocked the cages, helping the people inside to safety. Together, they called the police and waited for help to arrive. As they sat there in the darkness, Sarah knew she had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. But she also knew that there were other truckers out there, just like the one who had tried to kidnap her. She knew she needed to warn others and make sure no one else suffered the same fate. After Sarah's ordeal, the police launched an investigation into the trucker's operation. It turned out that he had been kidnapping and trafficking people for years, using his semi-truck as a cover. He had a network of accomplices, and it was only a matter of time before he would have been caught. Sarah's bravery in the face of danger had saved countless lives. She was hailed as a hero by the media, and her story inspired many others to come forward with similar tales of horror on the highways. Sarah's life was forever changed by her experience, but she refused to let it define her. She used her newfound fame to raise awareness about the dangers of trucking and to fight against human trafficking. Over the years, Sarah became a spokesperson for victims of human trafficking and a tireless advocate for change. She worked with law enforcement and lawmakers to pass legislation that would crack down on the perpetrators of these heinous crimes. Her story inspired others to speak out and fight back against their abusers. Sarah's bravery and determination were a beacon of hope for many, and her legacy continued long after she passed away. Today, Sarah is remembered remembered as a hero and a champion for those who cannot speak for themselves. Her story is a cautionary tale about the dangers that lurk on the highways and a reminder that we must always be vigilant and aware of our surroundings. The trucker who had tried to kidnap Sarah was eventually caught and brought to justice, but his evil deeds had already claimed many lives. Sarah's bravery had saved countless others, but she knew that the fight against human trafficking was far from over. In the end, Sarah's story serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, there is always hope. We must never give up in the face of adversity, and we must always stand up for what is right. The end of Sarah's story is a triumph of the human spirit, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. And it is a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference in the world, no matter how small our actions may seem. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed these spine-tingling trucker horror stories as much as we did. If you want to see more bone-chilling tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay up to date on all our latest videos. And as always, please leave a like and comment to let us know what you thought of this video. Thanks again for tuning into Mr. Horror, and until next time, stay spooky.